you all know, everything got canceled in the spring. So we thought we'd do this as a coffee hour just to kind of keep in touch. So I'd like to introduce Halona Norton-Westbrook, who is an alum, class of '05. And that's really only 15 years ago. She's had a meteoric rise in the museum world because now she's the CEO of the Honolulu Museum of Art.
Wow.
So I'd like to just introduce Halona and have her tell us about her path from Mills, maybe through Mills, to being CEO of HOMA, as we call it. Halona?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for the nice introduction, and thank you everybody for joining us today. It's really just a pleasure to see other alums and have the chance to chat. And I can honestly say that everything about my career to date is because of Mills. It was at Mills that I really, was encouraged to go on this path to become a museum leader.
Oh, where are you going?
Somebody didn't mute. We should have done house rules.
Yeah. Okay, good. Everybody's muted now. So yeah, it was really at Mills that I was set on my path to be a museum director, and I've been pretty single-mindedly pursuing that ever since. And the Honolulu Museum of Art is just a fantastic museum. I mean, as you, I hope, have all visited or will visit sometime in the near future. We are open now. It is a museum that, going back to 1927, was started by Anna Rice Cook, who, by the way, also went to Mills. I don't know if anybody knows that. So
I didn't know that.
It has like Mills, deep in its veins. The deputy director at the museum right now is also, Allison Wong is also a Mills alum. So
Right.
We love Mills, right? At the Honolulu Museum of Art. And so I went to Mills originally. I was a studio art major and American history major. So I was a double major. And then it was through those two interests that I became really involved in what was happening at the Mills College Art Museum. We had at that time a director there whose name was Stefan Yost, who's now the director of the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto. And Stefan, along with several other people in the art history department, Marianne Milford, Joanne Bernstein, and Hung Lu, who is my painting instructor, were people who were very, very supportive. I should also mention Marianne Sheldon, who is a history professor, but was probably my greatest supporter at the school, both kind of personally and in my development professionally. And when I was at Mills, I actually had a child. My daughter is 18 now. So I had a child when I was at Mills my junior year. And I also just had a baby. So I have a 4-month-old now too. I have a baby daughter named Minerva, and my older daughter is Giovanna. So, there couldn't have been a better place for that particular circumstance. And I just felt very embraced and helped by Mills. And I think that I was 20 years old at that point, and it was a real turning point in my life in every sense. I had my first child. I really felt a kind of synergy of all these different things that I had an interest in, history, art history. And then really with this kind of blossoming that was happening at the museum under Stefan Yost, where he was really bringing the community into the space and really kind of activating the collection and really taking the students very, very seriously. I mean, I always think that's one of the gifts that was given to me at Mills, was just feeling like people took me very seriously and there was high expectations on me. And that was very transformative in my development. So I graduated from Mills '05. Shortly afterward, Stefan Yost left the Mills College Art Museum. He went to run another museum called the Shelburne. And I came back to Mills for a year and worked at the museum while they were looking for a director during that period of time, which was kind of, just again, serendipity, but it was really, really good timing and great fortune. And it had been just long enough out of undergrad that I had the experience of, juggling several horrible part-time jobs. And so I was extremely grateful to be once again back on my career path. And during that year that I was back at Mills, I was 24 at that time. It really was clear to me that, this is what I want to do. I want to be a museum director. And so from there, I really have kind of pursued that goal single-mindedly. I, took my daughter, who was then 3, almost 4, and we went to England. We moved there. We'd never been, but I got into a graduate program that I was really excited about. So I ended up living there for almost 7 years, and I completed my master's and my PhD. And then as I was finishing my PhD, I got a position in Toledo at the Toledo Museum of Art, which is another fantastic museum, which I know people aren't often in Toledo, but if you happen to be in Toledo, it's really worth a visit. A lot of synergy with the Honolulu Museum of Art in that it has this extremely strong and historic connection to supporting the community. It has a fabulous collection. And in Toledo's case, it's free. It's free for everybody, which is, the dream for Honolulu Museum of Art someday. But I was there in Toledo for 7 years and was really there as part, initially a program that was funded by Andrew W. Mellon Foundation that was about training the next generation of museum leaders. So I went there, and it was initially supposed to be a 2-year fellowship. It got turned into a 3-year fellowship, and then my job was made permanent there. And I really enjoyed that experience. It was very eye-opening for me to live in the Midwest. That was different than anything I had experienced before, but I'm really thankful and appreciative of it. Especially, seeing the 2016 election happening there and really seeing that up close. I feel like I have a much different perspective on that than I would have had I been living on the coasts or still living in England. And then, a couple of years ago, I started to feel that it was really time for me to start looking for a museum directorship. And in fact, Mills is the second job that sorry, not Mills, but Honolulu is the second job that I seriously really considered. And it was just a great fit. So I was very honored to kind of go through an extremely long interview process, which was about in total 6 months long. And then it was just a year ago that I, had word that I had gotten this job in Honolulu, and then moved here in January, was on the job for 10 weeks before the coronavirus happened. And so it's been a lot of, responding in real time and figuring things out on the ground. And then in the middle of all that, I had my second daughter. So I was pregnant when I got here. And so, yeah, it's been quite a year. But I absolutely love the museum. I just feel so honored to be the director, and Mills was just an extremely important part of my development, both professionally and personally. And I'm always happy to talk to other Mills alumni and to do whatever I can for Mills.
Halona, I know the pandemic has changed everything, and especially in the museum world. But I'm wondering if we can go just before that, and you can tell us what some of your aspirations were for the museum. Some of the things that you probably said that got you the job.
Yeah, I mean, even with COVID, they're much the same, right? It's just on a slightly longer trajectory now and frame of implementation. And for me, I think that the pandemic has a silver lining for us as a staff and as a team, because the museum, like many museums, this is like a common museum problem, had sort of gotten into a way of being where they were planning and executing the same thing at the same time. And so they weren't doing any significant long-term planning. And because of that, we were missing out on some opportunities, to connect with the community, to kind of be a little bit more just more strategic fiscally long term. And so there's a number of things that now actually the pandemic allows us to take a step back and start to do that long-term planning that's going to be really helpful in the long term. But in terms of, the vision that got me the job, right? It was really explaining to the search committee that I wanted to build the vision with the people who were here. Right? I feel often that directors will come in and say, this is the vision, and it's their vision, and they just want to lay it over the institution. And instead, I was really adamant that, obviously I have my own ideas, my own experiences that inform, how I approach my work. But I really want the future of the museum to be something that we build together. So really where I've been leading us is kind of understanding that we have some core things that we are committed to. So chief amongst those is art and education, right? That has always been part of the museum, going back to the very, very beginning. There's always been an emphasis on community and accessibility. Again, that was part of the initial vision of Anna Rice Cook, our founder. And always a real sense of the museum as a restorative oasis for people, where a place where people could come and just feel welcome and be social and be connected. So those elements together really need to inform wherever we go, right? The world is really different than it was in 1927. We have to evolve and adapt, but those core things are really at the heart of who we are. And so thinking about building the future, you know, it's a matter of really operating from a sense of, you know, having a strong institutional identity and having strong values that guide us forward, and then working together to develop what the vision is that is going to be, that is the expression of those values, you know, for the next century.
I noticed you've reopened on a limited schedule. How's that going? I think 4 days a week now and evening hours and
yeah, so we are open now Thursday through Sunday. That's a different schedule for us. We're open longer during the day. So every day, you know, Thursday it's until 6 o'clock, Friday and Saturday it's until 9 p.m. and then Sunday it's until 6 o'clock. So those are considerably extended hours from what we used to have. Friday evening is now our Pauhana evening, so it's free for the local community. And thinking with the adjustment of the hours is really, you know, it's always bothered me when museums are open like 10 to 4. You know, I mean,
yeah.
who is that for, right? It's not for anybody who has a job. It's for everybody else. And so I think that museums just need to do a better job being responsive to what people's real schedules are. And that's part of the intention with our readjusted hours.
Oh, I see that Camille has a question. Camille, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Well, just wanted to make a comment. I was at the museum on Thursday, and actually, Halona, I think I met you, but I didn't know what you look like.
Yeah, I remember. Were you looking for the exhibit? And I
Yes.
And my like friend, it from the boss.
Friend is a member, and she said, "That's the director, I think. I recognized her from the website." So, you know, for those of us, I think, that are in a certain generation, and maybe we're used to meeting people in person or, you know, seeing people in print, I really wasn't aware of who you were. I knew there was a new director of the museum, and then it wasn't until I got the Mills invitation that I realized the connection to, you know, your role and your alumni of Mills, and, you know, to the previous director, Stephen Jost. Yeah, so I was a little bit embarrassed when she said, "I think that was the director that we asked. Where is the Fuji exhibit?" And I just wanted to say, I really liked what you were, when you were just explaining about the change of the times for the admission. I think it's great. I think it's wonderful that you try to reach out to when the majority of the people can come to enjoy the museum. And the other thing is just, it does take advantage of the fact that we have this very warm, humid weather right now, and that the afternoons are usually warmer. So it makes a lot of sense to have the afternoon through evening hours when the museum's open. But I was wondering, because of your plans for the next few months, and knowing that we may not be able to get together in person as much as people would like to, you know, what other ways, you know, you're thinking about doing outreach for the next few months?
Yeah. So, you know, we've developed some things that are kind of trying to be responsive to the particular moment that we're in. So we have some art kits that we've developed for school-age children, and that we're distributing those all around Honolulu so that people can have kind of hands-on art activities. We thought that was important. We've done an initiative called Museum from Home, which you can see on our website, where we try and, you know, do tours of the galleries, you know, really kind of telling the stories behind the art in a way that, you know, is both kind of transferable to online, but once the pandemic is over, that content again then goes back into, you know, just reinforcing the visitor experience in the gallery. So trying to work in that way. We're developing some virtual school field trips, which are going to launch in the spring, which will be, I think, really a great resource for people. And we're also planning, for those of you who haven't been to the museum, we have these just beautiful, fantastic courtyard spaces that the museum is built around. And so for the spring, we're really planning on doing a lot of activating of those spaces, kind of taking the museum outside and having more experiences that are accessible to visitors, both inside and outside in the spaces, just because I think, you know, it's very, very clear to us all now that 2021, you know, is a continuation of the pandemic, and whether it starts to look better towards the end, I mean, that's what we all hope, but it goes on. And you know, anybody who is involved in an institution, especially a nonprofit, will tell you this is a super challenging time, right? Because planning is just not super in sync with the pandemic, right? And we're trying to create a vision, but we're doing so in a way that there's just so much uncertainty. I mean, we know that there's so much uncertainty in every sense of our lives right now. But that also makes me feel all the more, you know, that sense of the museum as an oasis and as a place where people can come and reflect and feel re-energized is more important than ever. And I'll just say, you know, another thing which has always been part of my thinking coming to the museum, and we'll see more in the coming year, is that I really believe that museums kind of have great treasures in terms of their permanent collection. And often museums sort of stop activating their permanent collection. They stop doing interesting juxtapositions. They stop telling stories about the things that they have. And that's really just a wasted resource. And especially here in Hawaii, we can't really do large traveling shows in the way that other museums can. And other museums are, you know, challenged now in the pandemic to keep going on in that regular mode of operating anyway. But here it's never really made sense for us, right? Because the shipping is just so expensive and the logistics are so complicated. So really thinking more about the permanent collection and how we take the incredible things that we have, but tell more compelling and interesting stories, and doing that. And then also thinking about, well, if traveling exhibitions are difficult to do here, we do have something that other museums would be quite envious of, which is that we have a place that people really want to come, right? Hawaii is a place that people are really drawn to. And so working actively to do more artist projects and more artist residencies where we invite artists either from here or from internationally or the mainland to do projects with us, right? And draw people to the museum as kind of an active creative center is something that we're also really excited about doing in the future.
I note Nicole is telling me that Beth has a question, so I'm going to defer to the president and let her ask the next question. Beth?
Thanks, Lynn. I don't want to step on anybody's toes.
No.
I'm Lynn. I'm so glad you brought everybody together. And Nicole, thanks for coordinating with Lynn too. It's terrific to reconnect to Hawaii at a time when I can't get there, actually. So, and to hear about Halona, it's so great to hear your experiences. You know, I wondered if, and it feels very consistent with the challenges we're facing at Mills, you know, in this space right now. It's interesting too, many museums are actually de-accessioning, in ways that they didn't in the past. And in fact, Mills has been part of this too with, what's happened at Mills over the last week. We set this world record. I just wanted to pull out a couple books here. This is, first I have Hung Lu right behind me on the shelf. So, and I have, and I've heard from Hung lately. She continues to do incredible work actually, and to stay connected to Mills. And your story, Halona, about art history at Mills and your connections, it also, it reminded me just last week, we got a notice that a 2010 graduate of Mills who was 94 years old when she graduated from Mills, she actually grew up in Oakland, and 78 years after she graduated from high school, she earned her degree from Mills in art history. And she loved it. And she has some amazing videos. You can find them online, actually. Maybe Nicole, you could post a link to that, to Hazel Suarez. But she actually made a bequest to Mills, to the art history department, $33,000 that will receive. She passed away last fall. So it's continued to have that kind of impact, the amazing folks at Mills actually in our studio art programs and in the art history department.
I love that, and thank you for sharing that. And I'm glad you did too, because it reminded me of another thing that I wanted to say, which was one of the things that was so special about my Mills experience was, which I had no idea when I went to Mills initially that this would be part of it, but just how enriching I found it to have so many resuming students, women who had come back later in life to be part of, you know, the Mills journey. And you know, the richness and the depth of experience that they brought to the kind of classroom conversations and the work, it was just such a special part of Mills. I mean, it really, really was. And, you know, it's great to be together, a bunch of 18-year-olds in a room asking questions. I love that. But it's like, there was something really, really special at Mills about the number of resumers that I got to interact with, you know, and often people who had these like incredible lives, right, where they really had to fight to come back to school for whatever reason. And I think I never took my education at Mills for granted, because for that very reason, because you could see people all around you all the time who had really fought to be there. And that was just such a special part of Mills.
Yeah, I think that continues to be true, you know, right now too. And I just wanted to ask you a little bit about before the pandemic. I felt like museums, and as you came into museum leadership at a time when there really was a shift in, you know, an ongoing shift in how museums interacted with the public. You know, no longer spaces for the elite and the, you know, a narrow swath, the 10 to 4 group that you just mentioned earlier, but instead really attracting young people with social events in an amazingly successful shift that actually hasn't been, at least to date, thoroughly echoed across the art world. Like craft fairs, arts and crafts fairs are really struggling now. You know, the organizers of those are trying to figure out how to reconfigure those. You know, the internet retail has changed the way art, you know, is transacted out there. So, but I found museums were ahead of the curve. I mean, do you think that's right? Were museums ahead in sort of reckoning with the new culture that's out there? And if they were, then why? Why were museum professionals like you ahead of the rest of, you know, nonprofit worlds in connecting to people?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of truth in that, for sure. I think that museums have, I would say in the last kind of 10 to 15 years, it was clear that there was about to be like a mass exodus of old time museum directors. So people who had really kind of storied careers, you know, but who had been in the field for like 30, 40, 50 years. And then all of a sudden there started to be like a little bit of a panic of like, these people are going to retire soon, basically all within 10 years of one another. And what's the next generation? So I think that, you know, it's definitely not the average person who says, I want to be a museum director, right? It's a pretty like specific sort of career path and job. So I think that the field as a whole has tried to be more intentional about bringing younger people up into those positions, right? And really given some good thought to that in the last decade. And because of that, I think that's where you're seeing a lot of this this push to kind of think anew about museums, about the experience. And you know, for me, it's just this deep love of art that I have that has always informed my life. You know, I think back to whether I was you know, a little kid at Montessori or like in elementary school, or like, you know, having a horrible time as a teenager, or, you know, coming to Mills, being a young mother, all these things, like art has always been the constant in my life that has given me solace and that has helped me kind of reflect and deal with any given situation that I find myself in. And I truly am just motivated by wanting other people to have that experience. You know, you're not going to convert everybody to be the diehard art lover that you are, but I want every single person in our community, you know, to come to the museum and have a sense of that feeling, have the possibility of that feeling. Because for me, it's really been just this steady sense of comfort and solace, you know, really throughout my whole life. And as an adult, I really think that art helps to strengthen our critical thinking skills, right? Which we look out at our society and we realize is desperately needed right now, right? Just the, you know, strengthening and centering of critical thinking in our everyday life. And to me, art has been the path that has unlocked those things. And so that is what kind of motivates me to get up in the morning. And, you know, I think the kind of good societal conversations and cultural conversations that are going on right now are about when we are self-reflective as individuals running institutions, we have to say, well, I'm very good at helping people who have a similar kind of background to me or a similar outlook to me, but how do I really make sure that the experience that I'm cultivating for our visitors and for our community is really inclusive of everyone who's here? And so kind of putting increased internal pressure on leadership, which I think is very positive, to be more open and transparent in our efforts to bring everybody into the museum and feel included.
Halona, this is Lynn again. I know you started several, well, the museum actually started the Friday night programs and whatever, and I have to admit that I'm of a generation where I kept wondering if wine and museums actually mix, because you read these horrible reports about people having drunken parties at mainland museums and breaking artifacts and whatever. Are you still, are those, I note that you said Friday night is a community night. Is it still a sort of a young people's night?
For a long time, we've had, I think what you're referring to is this event called Art After Dark, right?
That's right.
People came in and it was kind of like a party atmosphere. Yeah, so we're not doing that for the time being because of the pandemic. It was a very successful event. So my understanding of that event is that it's been going on for several years, and it kind of started to take on a little bit of a life of its own. And I think speaking to your fears did start to get a little bit out of hand. And then right before I came, they had done some things to kind of rein it in a little bit. And it was at a great kind of happy medium, right? Where people were coming and being social and enjoying the museum, which is exactly what you want, but it wasn't quite as rowdy as it was at its peak. So I think that, there's nothing wrong with museums being social spaces, and we want to encourage that, right? But we want to do it in a way that everybody feels welcome and invited in, and that it's a pleasant experience for everybody, right? It's not a nightclub, but it is a place where people should feel that they can relax and let their guard down. And I'll just tell you a little bit of a story that kind of relates to this, which is that when I was in Toledo, we at that museum, there is a huge concert hall of about 2,000 seats that's attached to the museum, and the local symphony, the Toledo Symphony, plays there. And somebody who had just joined the Toledo Symphony said to me, I heard from a patron, and they really said that the one thing that would, get their family to come to the symphony is if we had, pizza and beer occasionally at the symphony, right? And she said, I just can't believe that. I'm so offended by that idea. And I thought about that, and I was like, well, is that all it takes? Will people really come to the symphony if we just get pizza and beer? And if you think about that's all that it is, that's standing between people caring and not caring about music, live music, then I think we can meet them, halfway, right? And I think that's where cultural institutions need to shift. And so I think it's a balance though, right? Like, we don't want to lose our identity. It's still about the art. That's still what you're trying to draw people in and get them excited about. But, we have to be just honest with ourselves that there's a lot of competition out there for people's time, right? And also that people want, I think, desperately places to connect and to relax. There's some really interesting surveys that have kind of been done in the museum field. And one that was done a few years ago said that across the board, looking at all different age ranges, one of the #1 reasons that people sought out cultural activities was to relieve stress. And that really says something, right? This is a time that we're living in, especially now, we all feel more stressed and isolated than we ever thought possible this time last year, right? But it's just that need for connection, that need for inspiration, just grows stronger, I think. I really do.
Interesting. Let me see, are there other questions? Well, then
I have just a comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Just based on
I think Lily
my
has
experience, I go back to Thursday, and I just think what a wonderful experience I had. And the museum was not very full of people, which was a bit concerning to me, because we were musing, well, people know that it's open, so they are not making reservations to come in? Is there something that's getting in the way? And I think the idea that we had before we went was we're afraid to be too close to people, and we thought there would be like a limit of people allowed to come in, and that there would be a problem in some of the galleries. And then we got there.
Yeah, we've been taking that really seriously so that
Yeah.
that people do feel comfortable and that they're never going to be crowded in a gallery. But sorry, go ahead.
And you know, when we did go through the exhibits and went to the koi pond, it was just such a serene experience. We just felt at peace, and it even takes me back to my time at Mills, when you could see, you know, because of the beautiful landscaping and architecture at Mills, we, you know, I just think of those things as a real centering experience for us. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would encourage everybody to go.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's very true what you say. The architecture does have a kind of Julia Morgan feel to it, which is
Right.
museum.
Yeah. And thank you so much again for that beautiful experience Thursday.
Yeah, of course. And we've, you know, tried so hard to kind of prioritize health and safety, right? You know, as much as we care about the museum and the art, it's like nothing is more important than the health of our visitors and our staff and our community, right? That's the number one priority. It really is. And so I think that we have been very diligent and very serious in kind of creating an environment that people feel safe. But you know, we are down in our visitor numbers. I mean, I don't think there's anything to hide about that, right? This and a lot of museums are. I think people just aren't fully comfortable yet, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. We just have to kind of accept that reality and plan accordingly. At the museum, you know, we have they're saying now, like the American Alliance of Museums, that about a third of museums will probably close because of the pandemic. Right. So that is like a super sobering statistic. And really for those museums, you know, there's kind of two museums that are really in trouble right now, two different business models. So one of them, you know, are smaller museums who have a smaller endowment, but their operating budget is almost like what their endowment is, right? So those museums are kind of in a serious pinch. So for instance, if you had $5 million endowment and $5 million operating budget, where you're really dependent on revenue, that's really troubling for those museums. The other kind of museum that's really in trouble are huge museums like the Met and SF MoMA, right? Where because they're so dependent on their visitors, and that it's almost like this machine that needs to be fed, and so they're also really kind of in trouble. And so actually, you know, museums like Homa, where, you know, we have a good size endowment, about $60 million. Our operating budget's about $15 million. And about a third of that we get from admissions and, you know, kind of the shop and the cafe and all those activities that you do. So that area is certainly like really hurting for us right now, and we have to be creative about how we're meeting that. So, you know, I know it's a hard time for everybody, but for those who can give to, you know, nonprofits, cultural institutions, to Mills, like that, everybody needs this support more than ever, because we're just in this pinch in this moment. But there's no doubt in my mind that, you know, that Homa is going to come through it. It's just a difficult chapter. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. I think Lily has her hand up there. Lily, you want to go ahead?
Hi. I'm sorry I joined a few minutes late, and hello to everybody, and welcome to the new director to Honolulu. My question is, I live in Makiki, close to the old modern Museum of Modern Art, and I wanted to know what's happening to it. That was our favorite place to take visitors, favorite place to visit, favorite place to go have lunch. So yeah. I'd like to know what's happening to it.
Yeah, so for people who don't know, that for a long time there was a museum in Honolulu that Lily's talking about called the Contemporary Museum, that has a location that's in Makiki Heights. And 10 years ago, that museum merged with what was then the Honolulu Academy, and that's what became the Honolulu Museum of Art. So that the museum that we have now is the result of a merger of those two institutions. And what happened was really incredible, was that the Contemporary Museum actually gave itself as a gift to the Honolulu Academy of Art, and that's how the new institution was created. So all of the property, all of the art, everything became merged together. And so for a long time, the museum was maintaining those two locations, right? The main campus location that we have, and then also this other location in Makiki Heights, which people really, really love. And it has just become financially unfeasible for us to carry both of those properties. And the decision was made, this was actually before I joined, this was while I was interviewing as director, that they were going to sell that property. The property that's in Makiki. And the idea was that, the money from the sale of that property will go back into the endowment of the museum, so that it's all to the long-term strengthening of the overall institution. And all of the art that was from that original partnership remains. It's just literally the sale of that space now. And so it's on the market. It's $15 million. If somebody wants to pick up an old museum property in Makiki. We've had a lot of interest in it, but it was slowed down a little bit from the pandemic. But I'm optimistic that ultimately somebody will buy it. We've had different people look at it. We've had people kind of looking at it, as a personal residence, but then also people looking at it as a kind of alternate nonprofit site for a number of different ventures. So we'll see what happens. And I know it's sad for people who really love that space. So I'm sensitive to that. And I know it's kind of the end of an era, but for the overall health of the institution long-term, it's really the right thing to sell it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Were there somebody else have a question?
Sure, I'll ask a question.
Oh, that's good. Go ahead.
Yeah, just wondering about the art museum school. Like, what are the plans? I know right now in-person classes, but that when I first moved here in 2015 was kind of the center of my social life, knowing that at that time the director Vince Hazen, but just wondering what's happening with the art museum school and plans.
Yeah.
And hello and happy. Good to see you, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. So right now the art school is closed, and we made that decision because we don't feel that this is safe to have in-person classes right now, right? And so it's closed as a result of that. Even once we do feel that it's safe to have in-person classes, it's going to take us a while to ramp it up and open it up again, right? So at the moment, we know not for now, and I would anticipate not until later in 2021, if not early 2022. But we haven't made a decision on that. It really depends what happens with the pandemic. So that's the reason for that. And that is strictly a result of the kind of current circumstance with the pandemic. The other thing that's happening is that about 10 years ago, so looking back to that time when the merger happened between the institutions, shortly afterwards, we got what's called a grant and aid from the state to do a project at the art school to help to kind of just take the museum forward and to develop a project that would improve the physical structure in some way and elaborate and build upon it. So that grant went through, I'm the third director under which that grant has existed. It was about to expire next year. And so when I came in, I said, I think that we should look to do something with this grant before it goes away forever, right? It's a $2 million grant from the state. And the condition of the grant is that it has to be matched by a $2 million donation that the museum fundraises for. And so what we were able to do was really quickly, instead of losing that money, shift the focus of what that grant has been talked about being for, and just hadn't kind of come together yet. And so now we're using that to really strengthen the infrastructure of the art school, really kind of do best in practice sort of classrooms and redesign the spaces so that they're a little bit more purposeful and functional. And there's a kiln house that's attached to the museum school that supports the ceramics program. So that's going to be rebuilt on the same location, but a better design. So all of that work is happening now in the period of time that the art school is closed. So the idea is that when we go to reopen, you know, whether that's later in 2021, 2022, early 2022, we will have a better art school than ever before. So that is what is happening with that part of the museum. And I know that, as you say, Jennifer, people, it's a much loved part of the museum experience. And you know, going back to those original comments I made about, you know, what do I see the museum as standing for? You know, art and education have always been part of what HOMA is about, right? And they're going to be part of the museum going forward. That building that the art school is in is called Linikona, and it's actually a state property, but we have a lease until 2081, November 2081, which I always remember because that's going to be my 100th birthday.
Yeah.
So it's a property that we really need to care for, and that will go on and be a very strong part of the museum's overall experience and commitment going forward. So again, it's like, it's a hard time because it's like people miss coming to the art school. We get people all the time to say like, I want to come back to classes, and I know, and I appreciate it, but it's like, we've got to make it safe. And then also we just have this opportunity with this grant money that we're using now, which I think is going to make it a much just even more robust program and space in the long run.
Halona, this is Lynn again. I was very happily volunteering at the museum for the last couple of years, just at the front desk, 1 or 2 afternoons a week. But it was such a wonderful experience getting to know the other volunteers, the museum staff, and I was impressed with how nicely the volunteers were treated. We were invited to so many things. I'm wondering what your plans are, and if and when you think you'll be able to get some of the volunteers, even the docents, back into the museum.
Yeah, so it's the same story in terms of the health and safety of everyone, right? I was just speaking to the docents the other day, and I think as we have you know, plans firmer in place for what we're going to be doing in 2021, and sort of what I was speaking to about bringing a lot of the museum's activities outdoors and into the courtyard spaces, there will be more of a need for those kind of traditional docent and volunteer roles, and it's just been a little bit muted in the time of COVID, right? And we've just been trying to think of a way to do it in a way that is not going to compromise anybody's safety, and it's been difficult in that respect.
Thank you. I would encourage everybody to volunteer once the opportunity's there again. Claire, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I didn't see how I could raise my hand virtually.
We can see you.
I just raised it. So my name is Claire, and I would just like to say that I've really been enjoying visiting HOMA during the pandemic. It was hard when we had the second lockdown and HOMA closed again, because it was such a bright spot to be able to go there about once a week. But I'm curious, I know you're new to Hawaii, but in recent years, there have been some very interesting exhibits that really give a sense of place to the exhibit, like the Kalakawa exhibit, which was fascinating. A little bit unusual for an art museum, because I think a lot of the displays in that exhibit were actually taken from the Hawaii State Archives. But it was fascinating, and I have the book from, you know, the catalog from that exhibit, and it's a treasure, really. So I'm wondering what plans there are to have sort of a sense of place in some of the exhibits.
Yeah, that is a great question. And we have, so I've been leading us through a strategic planning process, which the museum hasn't had in a number of years. So we're kind of right in the middle of that now. We started it sort of in around May or June was when we really started to talk about doing that for the museum. And we are hoping to have that strategic plan ready and in place by at least, I would say, March or April, right? And really have something that we can share with the community. But in doing the kind of first level of kind of investigation into that strategic plan and what it's going to look like, The first thing that I did was I created a survey that I sent out to the trustees and the staff. So everybody got the same survey that they had to fill out that had these 3 questions. And the 3 questions were this. The first one was about, tell me what you see as the ideal visitor experience. What do you want people to experience when they come to Homa, right? And the next question was about, okay, so imagine it's 100 years from now, we're all gone, only the museum remains, right? What would be your greatest hope for the museum at that time? And then the third question was about articulating values that the museum you believe are there or that the museum should have, right? And that those should go forward for all time as well. So those were the 3 questions we asked the trustees and the staff. And then we took all of those answers, which were just so wonderful to see, because there's actually such a sense of alignment in where people want to go for the most part. And we kind of synthesized the findings of those. And one of the things that came through was a really strong appeal for the museum to have a greater sense of place in everything that we do, right? That it's not enough to just come to the museum and feel that you're in a beautiful art museum and have a kind of great art experience. You want to know that you're having that experience here in Hawaii, and that you're connected to the history of Hawaii and the future of Hawaii, right? All of those things together in the experience. And also in terms of our exhibitions and in terms of the actual emphasis on the art, there's really a call to have a greater emphasis on the arts of Hawaii, right? And also on contemporary art in general, right? People just want to see the art of our time as it's being made now and have access to that. And so I think that those things are really going to be a strong component of our strategic plan going forward, because it's something that people are saying so much. So your views, echo the views of the people, close to the museum as well. So I'm really pleased to hear you say that.
I'm looking in the chat room to see if there are any more questions, but
can I say something also?
Sure.
To more recent alumni who I see on the call?
Yeah, there are several.
I just want to say that everything about my career path has been impractical. It was never a good idea to pursue the things that I have pursued. And I had a child. I was a single parent for a long time. But that's exactly the reason that I was successful, because I was doing the things that were really dear to my heart, and I just stayed true to that, and I kept going. And the interesting thing about when you do something that nobody else is doing is, at first nobody cares, and then all of a sudden you're the expert. So there's a really sharp jump between those 2 things. And I just encourage everyone, and especially Mills women, to follow your passion and follow your dream, and just don't be deterred by that. If you just keep going for it, it will work out. And especially if you're a little bit flexible about what it looks like, but you have that desire and kind of the values that guide you forward about what you're most passionate. I just truly believe that that's the way to kind of settle on the career and the path that is right for you.
Halona, I want to thank you so much for that. We do have several recent grads, and I think all of the ones with us today are still in grad school. So you're just such a wonderful role model for everyone, but especially our recent grads who are still working through this career path. Yeah. I think we've only got about 10 minutes left. We've filled up our time, and I want to thank you. I want to give Beth a few moments to make some comments and answer any questions if there are some for the college. Beth?
Thank you, Lynn. And wow, Halona, your comments so resonate with me, and I'm so grateful for the chance to learn from you. I really appreciate it. I'll just note, I have been to Toledo many times myself, and but I don't know if we ever went to the museum, which is kind of sad, right? But I had 2 brothers who lived there for many years, and I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My dad worked in Pittsburgh and in Ohio in the steel industry in that part of the country for a long time, and so that was Toledo wasn't that far, but yeah, and a very different mindset. And my family, who are still located in Ohio, have a very different mindset. It helps expand my own perspective to understand where they are, because it's not the same as I find here in Oakland, to be honest. So Lynn, I'm so glad you brought everybody together. You know, those of you who are the glue for the Mills alums who are in Hawaii make a tremendous difference for us. And Halona, hearing your description of where things are really resonates with Mills. So I'm going to say a few things to sort of frame that, and then I'd love to hear questions from you all and give you a chance to ask me to talk more about the things you're most interested in. I do want to note that the sense of place is increasingly important at Mills too. We now open our events with a land acknowledgement. I am here while I'm at Mills on the Lone land, and we seek to try to honor the presence of the indigenous community here too. The flowers that are behind me here are from the Mills Community Farm. The farm supplies our food service vendors on campus with food. It also creates opportunities for students to work. We deemed that essential work throughout the pandemic. So we've had Mills students working on the farm throughout, and and they supplied an organic certified agricultural box. You know, we got farm boxes to the folks who were on campus throughout the pandemic, as well as they sell flowers and other things when we have the opportunity to do that. I also want to note that the public art exhibit is another example of our connection to the indigenous peoples of Northern California and of indigeneity as a concept generally. And actually, Nicole, could you drop in the link to the public art exhibit? So we just opened 2 weeks ago a new art exhibit at the front gate. And when you do get a chance to come back to Mills, and when we can all travel again, which we will be able to, we won't always be in this space, but we are going to be in this space for some time yet. The new art exhibit at the front gate was an effort to recognize the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement and to connect Mills to the neighborhoods of East Oakland that are around us. And 2 recent graduates who are featured on the website that Nicole will drop in for you to look at in their first public art exhibit. They both graduated in 2020 with MFAs from Mills. They wrapped the pillars at the Richards Gate in line drawings of invasive and native species of plants here in Oakland, and the colors they used were drawn from the palette of colors that would appear in nature and also the colors of the neighborhoods around us. They also used colors from the sign that inspired this exhibit, which was posted by Mills students early after the George Floyd murder, that said Black Lives Matter and listed the names, Floyd's name, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, 3 of the many names of persons who've been lost in the violence against our Black communities. So there's a Black Lives Matter sign that is part of the art exhibition. And then there's these pillars wrapped in this beautiful exterior vinyl. And our hope is to be able to have a series of exhibits, actually not just this one, that would give many Mills artists and other artists in the Oakland community a chance to express a connection between the campus and the communities around us, and also start to elaborate the many aspects of the Black Lives Matter movement and our own connections and efforts to be more inclusive, and the imperative that we be more inclusive, honestly, the equity imperative that's out there right now with Mills and with the communities around us. And I want to thank Stephanie Hayner, our director of our art museum, the Mills College Art Museum, because she was critical actually in helping us envision that. We have this kind of exhibit, and those of you connected to art exhibits know this. It's hard to actually fund and establish, solicit ideas for, work that all the way through. We needed a lot of help from our facilities team, from our advancement team, and I'm grateful to Nicole and all of the advancement team who helped us work on that, as well as we connected to the local artists and supported recent graduates of Mills. I want to connect that to the larger anti-racism work that's ongoing at Mills, and I want to thank Lynn and our other trustees who actually took a very important and historic step just recently. They adopted an anti-racism commitment. It's now posted on the Mills website. It's a sign of their recognition that we're at the beginning of efforts to truly become anti-racist, that the Board of Trustees needs to lead and set a foundation for all the other efforts that are actually happening across Mills, and to recognize concepts and habits and behaviors that we've not always recognized in the past. Are a part of actually breaking the cycle of disparate outcomes and inequity that Mills and our community and higher education have been a part of. And it's not to say that there haven't been a lot of incredible leaders at Mills that have made a tremendous difference. There have, and there continue to be. And yet we haven't achieved the full inclusiveness, and we exist in a world, we haven't achieved that full inclusiveness that our students deserve and our communities deserve. But we also exist in a world that continues to perpetuate attitudes and ideas and outcomes that are counter to those values of equity and access. So it makes a big difference that our board adopted this statement, and we have a number of efforts ongoing around the campus where we have a new intersectional anti-racism team that's working. We have our Division of Student Life has a multicultural organizational competency program that's ongoing. We have a white accountability group that's mostly staff, but a few faculty. They meet regularly to engage about concepts of white privilege and try to focus on encouraging the greater understanding and recognition for the people who, like me, are white on the campus, as opposed to the people of color who generally have a greater familiarity with the ideas and the challenges that they face. So it's actually, I think it's a reset moment for Mills and for many institutions right now. And that reset moment does run beyond the equity imperative that I just described. Although I think that's a good place to start, because the pandemic has actually exacerbated that equity imperative, because this pandemic has landed so much more heavily on some people than it has on others. It's also a reset moment in higher education. You know, Halona described that many museums are predicted to close in this and characterize those that are deemed most vulnerable. It's very much the same in higher education. There will be a tremendous impact of the pandemic on higher ed, and it will not be evenly distributed. It will land much more heavily on some institutions than others. Small institutions are more vulnerable. Those with enrollment challenges, those with right now, those in urban areas are more challenged. That won't always be true, and it hasn't been in the past. But actually securing the safety of our students in high density areas is just harder because of the pandemic and the public health challenges out there. It does help, though, to be able to offer education relatively close to home for many students, because travel is a challenge right now because of the spread of the virus. One of the measures that I could tell you about of many of the stress on higher education institutions was actually a report just published by some advisors to many medical campuses and universities and colleges across the country that Mills has worked with particularly. It's this group called U3 Advisors, rooted on the East Coast, but also working with Mills and some other institutions. They actually did an analysis of 126 different regions across the country that have multiple higher educational institutions in them. And they listed them from 1 to 126 in terms of how much regional risk of closure there was. In other words, which regions of the country actually have institutions that should be working together, because there's more than one institution that is stressed, and they may be able to collaborate in ways that would be useful. Well, the Bay Area landed 24th on their list from 1 to 126. And it's not, Mills isn't called out in that particularly. There aren't the names of particular institutions. But it's not just Mills that's at risk right now in the Bay Area. The San Francisco Art Institute is in a closure mode right now. Notre Dame de Namur is in a similar place. The Bay Area institutions are definitely struggling to sort of manage right now. And we do need to work together in order to find the right strategies in the future. So just a quick sketch of enrollment, and then I'll talk about a couple of our approaches to this space that we're in right now. Our enrollment is down about the amount we anticipated, which means about 15% from last year. We projected that. Because we thought it would be about the average across higher education. And that is what it has essentially come in at. However, most places are not at the average. We actually ended up right at the sort of median there of losing about 15% of our students to economic concerns and family issues and concerns about public health, all the things that have kept students away from educational opportunities in general in this year. The community colleges have been most dramatically affected across the country. Community college enrollment is down about 22%. And that's an incredible challenge for the educational aspirations and the demands of the economy out there, because a lot of students are deciding they can't afford to invest in themselves right now. Because of the pandemic, and actually more important to Mills' overall budget is actually the campus residential population. So normally we have 500 or 600 students who live on the campus and study with us. This year we have 180. We anticipated it would drop, but we didn't anticipate it would drop quite that much. All of those students are in single occupancy housing, but for those who are in family housing with their family units. But we have space for more singles than 180, but that's what we ended up with. And that's in large part because we're in a primarily online curriculum, and we anticipate remaining in that through the spring semester. We'll have more in-person experiences if we can. I don't know if you looked at the COVID numbers today for the U.S., for the mainland, but they're not going to make you feel more sanguine about the return to greater operations. California has been trending in a good direction for quite a while, but we've also started to jump. And in fact, the numbers from Friday were much higher in California than they have been too. But because the numbers across the country have been so high here in the mainland, we also anticipated it would start to go up in California because we're not isolated from the rest of the country. So we think that the pandemic, like Halona said, oh, look at that. So a new visitor to the Zoom room. So who is that, Halona?
This is a future Mills grad.
Beautiful.
It's so cute.
I love it. We anticipate that the impact of the pandemic in a really profound way will extend into the next year. So, and it's just the efforts to get a better treatment is terrific. It makes a big difference. Public health measures and all the things we're doing make a big difference, but the vaccine likely won't be widely distributed for a while yet. So that's where we are. It means we're running a bigger deficit than we used to. It means we need to think out of the box. So thinking out of the box means doing something that we wouldn't ordinarily do, which is to monetize an asset of Mills to help borrow from the future to pay for the present. And that's what we did. So last week we sold a treasure of Mills, the first folio of Shakespeare. And this was the incredible book that Christie's produced to actually help sell this. It set a world record for a work of literature. It sold for almost $10 million. The previous world record was 7.25 million. That was in 1998 for a first edition of Chaucer. Christie's had sold this in the midst of what they call Classics Week. They had 3 items that they highlighted in their results from Classics Week. For the first time, they were all sold by institutions. The Brooklyn Museum of Art, the Cleveland Museum of Art, and Mills College sold these treasures essentially to make sure they could continue to support their mission moving forward. And that's actually a huge change for institutions that are protectors of our cultural legacies and history. And we're having to make tough decisions. I'm grateful that Mills will benefit from this right now. You know, our priority really are the people that we have with us right now, our students, our faculty, our staff, the communities around us, and protecting the legacy that our alumni actually have earned too by earning degrees at Mills. We need to think more broadly about how to continue that into the future, which is why we're thinking about an expanded partnership with UC Berkeley that is actually incredibly exciting, because it is a way to potentially realize that reset for Mills in higher education that we see likely to happen in many, many different institutions as we face the long-term impacts and the short-term financial exigency of the pandemic. I do want to tell you a couple of things that are happening as a result of the pandemic. Yesterday, I walked around the campus with a tour group that we had. We were all distanced, we were all masked, and it was a group from UC Berkeley that came over. And I have to say, what Halona said about getting out, and those of you who have visited the museum said how powerful it is to get out and be together. I can't tell you how happy these Berkeley folks were to just witness each other and to see them and to be outside moving across a beautiful campus. It was a spectacular day at Mills, and seeing the spaces on the campus and also being able to connect to each other. So I do urge you, as you get the chance to be outside and to be in relatively safe environments, manage the risk that's out there, but not let go of that essential need for connection that we really do have, especially when you have all the beautiful places that you do where you all live. So some of the ways we've tried to navigate, we had a virtual convocation ceremony. We actually had a Hawaiian component to that was really lovely. Iwa Gregg and her mother, Napua, who joined us via a video that they recorded for us with a greeting. We also had poetry and speeches and a fabulous musical performance of Fires of Wisdom, actually. It's honestly, Fires of Wisdom can be challenging to perform effectively, and not everyone sort of uses their lungs in a big way in that, but having the folks on the Zoom, it was just an amazing group. And I know Nicole and her team will make good use of that going forward, because it was just a great, evocation of the Mills spirit. I also want to mention some of the things that we're especially focused on doing. We're trying to improve the campus as much as we can before students come back. You should see the library now. I was in it just yesterday afternoon. You know, all the windows that look out to the creek in the Olin Library. For those of you who have been in the library since the, which I assume some of you have anyway, since the Olin Library went up and it moved from Carnegie over to by the creek there in the Olin building. there's that huge wall of windows, and we previously had all kinds of reference volumes all around there. And now it's an amazing seating area. It's what people want when they come to a library now. They want a place that they can connect, via the internet to all the sources that they want, and they can connect to each other. So that's been really pretty amazing. The other thing that we're working to do on the campus is to improve some of the existing facilities while students are away. We're building a kitchen on the community farm. The roof just went up on it. I think we're going to use a photograph of a rainbow over that new metal roof actually in the holiday card. We're working through that right now. We have some great spaces on the campus that we're actually able to improve a little bit more easily when they're not as heavily used as they would normally be. We've also worked to support students. The tech needs and connectivity needs of students are real. And this is one of the ways that the impact of the pandemic is inequitable. So we subsidized iPad purchases for students. And we have more than 300 iPads and other devices that we've either enabled students to buy or loaned to them. We've also loaned out Mills iPads to faculty and staff who need them, including some who need them for their kids. Because those of you who are parents, you know that there's no one who is as uniquely impacted as parents of young kids right now because of the difficulties with getting childcare support and school. I mean, it's a really tough job. It's going to have huge gendered implications for women's access to professional success, and no one has the answer to that yet. At Mills, we've tried to support parents by offering leaves to parenting faculty actually in the spring, so they don't have to teach quite as much. We've also offered a stipend to adjunct faculty who are facing parenting challenges. And we've offered to our staff an afternoon off so that they can take half a day off as they work with their supervisor, recognizing that it's pretty much impossible to do your entire job and to be a full-time homeschool teacher, actually, especially when the online education, while this is a great experiment and we're coming out of it learning a lot, it's very tough, especially at lower grade levels for kids. Our faculty has been terrific. We hired new instructional designers. They've come up with some amazing ways to connect to students during this time. And we will have some more in-person opportunities for students on the campus in the spring. If the Alameda County has moved into a less restrictive tier on the California hierarchy of counties, we hope that lasts. And if it does, we'll be able to open more of the campus, like our tennis courts, which right now have been closed, and we've had dance classes on mats that are, distanced apart. The pool has been closed. We hope we can reopen that. We're also installing a new pump system at the pool, which we've long needed to do. And then the last thing that I'll mention is the Student Hardship Fund. Halona mentioned how important it is to continue to give during these times. Many people have been engaged in the political environment in terms of giving because of the historic election that's upon us right now. Students and their basic needs really matter tremendously right now. Our students have an incredible amount of need compared to in the past. Our financial aid director just told us that in the most recent assessment of the students with a lot of need, their family income had dropped $9,000 from the previous year. And these are not students whose family income was very high to start with. So they're seeing, our students and their families are seeing, who are the most vulnerable economically, are seeing the biggest impact. Mills has passed through a significant amount, not only of Mills aid, but federal aid, which has been another challenge for our staff. Honestly, no federal aid program comes without a whole lot of strings attached and challenging rules that you have to meet. But we've passed about $600,000-700,000 back to students directly through the federal grants that came to Mills. We've also refunded, by the time we're done, we'll refund some $800,000 to students who couldn't stay on campus through the spring because of the pandemic. Mills is not in a financial place where we can afford to just pay money that we can't easily replace. And yet our students deserve our support right now. And all the contributions to that Student Hardship Fund enable us to continue to meet the demand. We also made a special grant that our advancement office worked with us to get. The East Bay Community Foundation funded a grant for undocumented students. And the Alumni Association funded a grant for international students because neither of those groups qualify for the federal aid that we were able to distribute to the students who had citizenship status. So that's sort of a little bit about what's happening at Mills. I remain privileged and excited and honored to be here at Mills during this time. Honestly, the campus is fabulously beautiful, if eerily quiet right now. I saw the wild turkeys on the campus this morning when I went outside. They've grown from little tiny things and there were more of them than there are now, to huge turkeys that are out there now. And it's just, and that's been during this pandemic. So a lot of time has passed, and some more time is going to pass until we sort of reconvene in the ways that we used to. But I'm grateful for all the opportunity and the sort of strategic planning that Halona talked about doing at the museum, happening at Mills during this time too. Okay, Lynn, that's a wrap for me. If anybody has questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you so much, Beth. That was very informative. We're a little bit past our hour's time. If anyone has more questions, maybe you can just, email them or something. I want to really thank Halona for this wonderful, wonderful presentation today, and thank everyone for coming. Hopefully, this time next year, we can have a coffee hour at the museum at the wonderful cafe and find out what's happening post-pandemic. But we have recorded this. Nicole has sent out a link, but for all of our Hawaii alumni who weren't able to see this, if you run into friends, I hope you tell them they've recorded it, figure out how to get the recording and meet Halona and hear about the academy, the museum.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. And congratulations on the new baby. Such a cutie.
I was excited to see all the Mills alums. I was just going to say briefly, if I can just make a final remark too, which is I just wanted to say in terms of selling the Shakespeare folio, I can understand what a difficult decision that is, but I just think it was absolutely the right decision of the college. We need the college to be there in perpetuity and to exist, for long after we're gone. And if this is the decision that helps to ensure that that's going to be the case, then I think it's the right decision. We can't take it lightly, but I'm fully supportive of it. So I was pleased to see that we were making that bold move.
Thank you. It was a very difficult decision for Beth and the trustees and the college administration, but thank you very much for that. We feel it was the right decision. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, and stay safe.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Stay
you,
safe. Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Nicole.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, everybody. Take good
Thanks,
care.
Beth.
Thanks, Lynn.
Bye, Halona. Thank you. Bye, Lucy. Hi. Bye. Thanks for coming.